We are back. Golenbock University, and the professor has returned, Peter Golenbock. All three of us now, Bazeball Mashuganas, are here. Alan Blumkin. How you doing, Alan?
Okay.
Good. Before we get started, I'm going to surprise Peter with this because I came across a book in my library that he didn't write. So in my baseball life, but beyond that, it's a book that he and I have a lot in common about this book. Because I used it as therapy, almost as therapy in the mid-'90s. And it was called Baseball and Men's Lives. And I found it in my library, and I looked at the front page of it, and Peter wrote, and I hadn't remembered this, probably why I bought the book, he wrote a little blurb, and I'm going to read you the blurb that Baseball and Men's Lives, the True Confessions of a Skinny Marink.
Yes.
I was a skinny Marink. Probably still am. The book was incredibly moving. Here's what Peter wrote. I now understand that my unabashed passion, for the game is not unique, but is shared by a significant percentage of right-thinking, blessed individuals. Oh, wonderful statement. Like I say, it probably got me to buy the book. And
all right.
Did you know, or do you know Robert Mayer? If he's not on Facebook, I can't find him. Do you know Robert Mayer well?
I don't know him well. I don't know him well. He sent me the book, as so many writers do, and asked if I would write him a blurb. And I just so thoroughly enjoyed it, and that's the blurb that I wrote him.
Yeah, well, again, it was about 25 years ago. We both so thoroughly enjoyed the book.
It's funny because I read pieces of his book to my class.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's wonderful.
Yeah, it's a great book, and if anybody out there, I have kind of a running bibliography on the network talking about a lot of different books. This is right up there. It explains our passion. It just it forgives us our passion over a game. When you think about it,
I prefer to tell my kids in my class. There's no making excuse for it. Basically, what I tell them is that baseball, the love of the game of baseball, is very much as much a religion as any of their religions. And it's just something that you happen to be born with. There's so much to it, and it's so important that it's nothing to make light of. If you're born with the baseball gene, it's a very, very, very important part of your life.
Yeah, thankfully.
Yeah, absolutely thankfully. No, that's correct.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Alan, are you familiar with this book? This probably not a book you haven't read. You read 5 books a week.
I'm not familiar with, but you suggested that Rob Mayer become a Facebook friend, and he requested me today, so I accepted.
Oh, okay. Then I did.
Very good.
That was the Robert Mayer. That's very good. Maybe we'll get him on, and we can just
very well. You should. Well, you
should.
There was a book that I read that was written in 1947 by a man named Robert Henderson, which debunks the whole Doubleday myth.
That's what we want to talk about with our Zachary Zanzone. Welcome to the airwaves. Welcome to Golenbock University. I hope you pay attention to the professor, our Zachary.
Yes.
You crack me up when you call it that. It's just.
Well, you are. I think Golenbock University is the perfect name. If I could learn to pronounce Golenbock, it would be even better. There's a speech class right next door to Golenbock University, so I could attend. That's the subject, our Zachary, and it is indeed something that you and Peter shared, conversation on Facebook based on a little happy birthday. I wrote a little thing and a picture of Abner Doubleday, who was a Union general, and everybody assumes he's the inventor of baseball, and you guys had a lively conversation. That so why don't you start, because you're the guest, our Zachary. You dispute that Doubleday invented baseball.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sorry.
I say he's got it backwards.
Oh, okay.
He's got information that it may well be that and Abner Doubleday did invent baseball. It's just not the Abner Doubleday that we're talking about. He can tell you about that.
Okay, please then go for it and excuse my ignorance.
Oh, no problem. So it's not my idea. George Vesey wrote a book called Baseball, A History of America's Favorite Game. And on page 44 of his book, he mentions a Ulysses Doubleday, who was the father of the general that we all associate with the invention of baseball. Well, we know that Abner Doubleday, the general, he never even set foot in the town of Cooperstown. However, he had a cousin named Abner Demas Doubleday, who grew up just north of Cooperstown and was 10 years old at the purported time that his cousin invented the game. He would have been 10 years old in 1839 when this letter sent to Spalding in 1905 with the Mills Commission alleged that Abner Doubleday invented the game of baseball. Vesey alleges that Abner Graves, the man who wrote the letter, may well have gotten the identities mixed up.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's the whole thing is really odd.
It is odd.
It's really odd.
You mentioned being in possession, Peter, of a document.
I do.
Along those.
I do. I have a letter from Alexander Cartwright's granddaughter, and as she ought to be, in this letter, she describes how infuriated that she is that people seem to think that this guy, Abner Doubleday, put the bases at 90 feet and put 9 people on a team and had a certain number of balls and strikes and that sort of thing. And in this letter, which is about 10 pages long, about half of it which I read to my class, basically she says, it's not Abner Doubleday at all, but it's my grandfather. And he was a ball player in New York City. He was a fireman with the Excelsiors? I think it was the Excelsiors was the name of the team. And apparently was involved with one of the very, very first baseball games at the Elysian Fields in Hoboken, New Jersey, where she contends her grandfather, set down the rules and made up the game and where the Hall of Fame ought to be. And this is what I've taught. This is what I've taught for the last, umpty years, because that makes a hell of a lot more sense than Abner Doubleday, who was a general in the Union Army, who wrote hundreds and hundreds of letters, who never once mentioned the game of baseball in any of those letters, and who, in fact, at the time he was supposed to have invented baseball in Cooperstown, was in the U.S. military at West Point at that time. So this guy, we know, did not invent baseball. But now we have an alternate Abner Doubleday who may well have invented baseball, and I find this conversation rather interesting.
And what makes it even more interesting is I'm looking at Ancestry.com, which has given me a lot of information here. There were a lot of Abner Doubledays and who lived in the area of Cooperstown.
Wow. It's hard to imagine even one guy was named Abner Doubleday.
Who would name his kid Abner, for crying out loud?
Yeah, exactly.
It was a lot of Abners and a lot of Ulysses, which was Abner Doubleday's father's name.
Huh.
Whoa.
And it wasn't Ulysses S. Grant. It must have been Ulysses from, well, it wasn't from that either. I don't know where that came from.
More common that might have been a much more common name in those days. Both Abner and Ulysses.
Yeah, right.
And what I find particularly interesting is Abner Demas Doubleday, who Vesey points to as a possible subject of confusion. He lived in Cooperstown through the Civil War. He had fought in the Civil War, returned to Cooperstown. He died in 1903 in Michigan, but the Mills Commission was commissioned in 1905.
Right.
So all these small points of history makes it, I don't know how likely, but possible that he could have fallen through the cracks. But then
exactly.
At best.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder. You ought to get Vesey on. I wonder where he found this information.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Let's try to get him.
Okay. Try.
All right, Alan. Do you have anything to add to this? Because
the Mills Commission was charged with producing a finding that baseball was invented in the United States rather than being derived from British ball games, especially the ball game known as rounders.
Exactly.
Okay, and I think right now, since the whole Abner Doubleday theory was debunked over 70 years ago, that the idea that it evolved from the British game of rounders has gotten much more acceptance.
Yeah. Right.
When they decided to leave, the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown because of, it was already there, and because of this bucolic thing, the United States Post Office issued a stamp in 1939 celebrating the 100th anniversary of Doubleday. But it was, with the general, it's a complete fiction.
It is.
I think on all of Ralph posts in the various groups where he posted this, I put down that this was a myth.
Yeah, I did post that picture in a lot of places, the interesting to me is that the two people that responded most vehemently, or three people, were Alan Blumkin, or Zachary Zanzone, and the professor Peter Golenbock. So, it's an interesting topic. You mentioned that you're pressed for time this evening.
Yes, unfortunately.
So I hope you'll come back another time.
Oh, I would love to. This has been absolutely fantastic. I really enjoyed it.
Before you go, do you, just off the top of your head, do you have any questions that you'd ask Peter Goldenbach if you were talking to him, and you are?
Well, Peter, we've talked before about the New York Mets. I called you a few months ago. I'm working on a book about the Mets.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if you recall that.
Yeah.
So we've had a couple chats before. I'm still working on it, and a few side projects, and slow going, but I'm getting there.
Always slow going. That's the way they are.
On this very network on Monday evenings at the same time, I have a Met show with my lifelong friend Marty Rose. And if you could call this number tomorrow night, we'll talk about your book and about the Mets.
Okay, yeah, I can try and do that. Yeah, sure.
Beautiful. Look forward to it. Good chance that Joel Youngblood will be on. I did an interview with him about his Giants experience, and he may be on tomorrow night to talk a little Mets.
I look forward to it.
Would you join us?
Yes, I can do that.
Beautiful. We look forward to it. And and now the three Baseball Mashuganas will talk about whatever Alan Blumkin suggests tonight. What would you like to talk about,
Me?
Alan?
Yeah. The others, I do so many shows now that, I did the one Thursday, and I do the basketball one, I do this one.
I know.
So,
what's on your mind? And you know what?
Okay,
it doesn't have to be baseball.
Come up on Facebook.
Because we are both, Peter and I are both boiling over with the world situation.
Oh,
and
me too. Me too. But I have a friend of mine that this is the only thing he talks about, and when stuff comes like this, I internalize most of the time.
Okay.
I don't want to deal
Could
with
you make an exception? Because when you say most of the time, I know you're right. I know you have strong opinions.
2 baseball strikes. In 81 and 94, I didn't want to talk about baseball at all.
Okay.
So I told this friend of mine that I told him a long time ago, and I tell everybody I speak to, that Trump has no bottom, and that nobody should be surprised by anything he or his flunkies do or say. No bottom. And when you think it's like when I was in the Army, I used to have a saying, when I thought they reached the height of stupidity, they always managed to surprise me. And this is the same way. There's no bottom. No matter how low you think he can go, there's always more.
Yep.
I'm very, you watch this thing. Every time somebody says President Trump, or I see President Trump in a scroll on the bottom of the TV or read it in the paper, my blood starts to boil. I internalize it. I don't like talking about this, constantly.
Well, I look at him more as an opportunist, and I look at the voters.
The people he's putting in there. Bannon?
I know, but here's the dichotomy. We're all three Jewish. Do you know that Trump surrounds himself with Jews in his family? He's got daughters dating Jews and marrying Jews, sons dating...
son-in-law Kushner is Jewish.
Right. And so what's the story with appointing this guy, Bannon, is absolutely dangerous to humanity.
Who knows?
And what
who knows what it is? In fact, the other day somebody on Facebook put up a post of Kellyanne Conway talking when the Republican primary started way back when, and how dangerous Trump was.
Yeah.
This has gone viral.
Sure.
Right. Well, when he made fun of the disabled journalist, and when he dissed the family of the Muslim family who lost their kid fighting in the American Army in a war that the Americans started. Basically, the Americans bombed Iraq and basically started ISIS, came from there. You had to go, how could this guy's a joke? And no one did take him seriously.
The people who backed
the people who voted for him took him seriously. And they still take him seriously.
Yeah.
I mean, I wrote a piece today. Saying that right now, this guy Bannon, who was a white supremacist, is the most powerful person in the government. Trump has appointed him to be over virtually everybody. And I said, how can the President of the United States appoint a white supremacist to lead our country?
Post, yeah.
And and what kills me is to get some of these Trump supporters to say, "Oh, he's not really a white supremacist." And then there was an article today that Bannon's wife, one reason that she divorced him was because he didn't want to send his children to school with Jews.
Right.
And
what she said, it was so natural. We didn't want to send the girls to school with Jews.
But then the Trump supporters then turned around and say it's only his ex-wife who's accusing him of this. It's like how can you accuse him of being a white supremacist or an anti-Semite, without further proof?
Right.
Well, she'd embarrass herself and say she went along with it.
But what I just find so interesting, is that they will excuse virtually any behavior.
They are dug in.
I mean,
they're absolutely dug in.
They have absolutely dug in, and and I'm probably saying something that's been said, too many times. But the moment that he was on the TV talking about how he treated, beautiful women when he was with the Bush kid, and that was not enough to disqualify him. And then
with the words he used, imagine Eisenhower. Adlai Stevenson said today that he groped a little. No,
but that's only one thing. That's only one thing. Where he talked, the way he talks about women, the way he talked to that journalist from Fox about the blood coming out of her, where. I mean, it's just so utterly bizarre.
He said he could kill somebody in Midtown Manhattan and he wouldn't lose a vote.
That was one of the quotes?
That months ago, and that's probably true because these people. I get the papers here. I see the letters. Okay, and these people who support him are totally dug in.
Totally dug in. I mean, whatever he does, they can justify.
Yeah. Exactly.
And it's going to be very interesting. There is a war coming, but the war that's coming, as I said today, the war that is coming is not between us and ISIS or between us and Russia. The war is going to be in this country between Trump and the people who care about our democracy.
Right.
I wouldn't be surprised if this clown gets us involved in a foreign war. And of course, if he tries to institute a draft, there'll be riots like they were in the.
But he's smart enough not to do that. He's smart enough not to do that.
Yeah.
No, because it's an economic draft and it works. So you don't have to mess with it. All you have to do is keep the middle class down enough that when a kid comes out of high school, he doesn't want to work at McDonald's. He'd rather get some service time, some government time, this, that, and the other.
This guy's crazy
enough to mindset.
Want to send troops to the Middle East and to quote, to destroy ISIS, unquote.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, they
crazy enough.
But he says all sorts of things.
I know.
And we're selling arms to both sides and all sides. You guys, and the three major religions think that their Mecca is three of the four major religions, the Muslims, the Jews, and Christians, think that area is something holy, and the Christians put defense against the middle, and they sell arms to both sides.
They were fighting over this for 1,000 years. And
they'll be fighting for another 1,000 years, and Trump is not going to help.
Killing each other since 700.
And Johnny Lunchbucket who says, "Well, I need a job." Well, your kid doesn't need to get leukemia because of what big business throws in the water to because there's no EPA, there's no regulations anymore. So you're going to get a job, and you're going to work all your life, and then your kid's going to get leukemia from drinking the water that the factory you work in threw in the river. And
I called Michael Flynn, the General Michael Flynn. My nickname for him is Jack the Ripper. That's the name of the crazy general that Sterling Hayden played in Strangelove.
Yeah.
Yeah, with his arm going up.
Yeah.
In the Nazi.
No, that's Strangelove. Jack the Ripper is the one with the bodily fluids.
Oh, okay.
Shuts down the base.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you,
Trump was a bad man.
Trump more reminds me of Captain Queeg in the Caine Mutiny, if you want to know the truth. I mean, when he went off on this tangent upon whether or not he had a bigger crowd at his inauguration than Obama had at his inauguration, and he just would not get off the subject.
No,
he's
not.
Still
right. And then he
subject.
justifies as well. More people watched because it was on TV and this and the other thing. You don't think the people didn't watch it when Obama was on TV? And they show pictures of the crowd. It's just unbelievable. And the press coverage. They don't show the demonstration, but once every 2 hours, that 5 blocks from the White House, you had people up in arms, destroying property, fighting with the police, and they didn't show just an inauguration. And here he comes, and doesn't he look presidential? Yeah, real presidential.
He said that his reception when he visited the CIA last week was better than the applause that Peyton Manning got in last year's Super Bowl. Everything that he
what was
does
interesting
has to
was
be the best,
the response.
has to be the greatest.
Yeah, the response from the CIA was really something else. They thought the guy was nuts.
He is nuts.
They think the guy's nuts. And he's not going to listen. He says he's not going to listen to the people in the know when it comes to foreign policy. He's going to listen to Bannon.
He's going to listen to all his brilliant.
He's going to listen to Bannon. You know where this keeping people out of the United States came from. It came from Bannon.
So, cutting to the chase down the road, they impeach him for something, and he's got to do it. They've got to get him for a crime or.
Why got to put Pence in?
Yeah, and then you got Pence, right? Exactly. Exactly. Is that going from the frying pan to the fire at this point?
Pence and Ryan is after Pence.
And Ryan's after Pence. We are so fucked and feathered. I'm telling you.
I know.
It's just not. It's not even funny. Sometimes I'll tell talent, well, it's good theater. Good theater. Hell, it's not. It's not funny anymore.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
Yeah.
I'd rather talk sports if you want to know the truth.
I think Pence.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk a little sports. Take our mind off of it. I
mean, nobody's going to listen to us talk this stuff. Nobody.
No, people listen, and they don't listen to me, but they listen to you. You got a voice. You have a voice, Mr. Golenbock, and
they listen to
sometimes
me, but I'd
it's
rather
the voice of reason.
Yeah,
we don't always agree.
I would hope so.
We don't always agree.
No, we don't. We don't always. We don't always agree. Every time I tell you that your guy Bernie cost us the election.
Well, no, I think Debbie Wasserman Schultz, rigged the primary, and that cost the election. So,
no, she should have rigged the primary. I think she should have. She should have done that. That's what she should have done.
How'd it work out?
That was her job. It didn't work out well at all. It didn't
work out. Are you being facetious? Is
no,
that
I'm
what
not being
not
facetious at all.
Can you trust the Democrats as far as you could throw them to the Republican side and vice versa with talk like that? No, you don't. It's not a coronation for the Queen, for crying out loud. And she had baggage, and he didn't, and he would have won the election. So no, we don't know.
They would have just destroyed him. Are you kidding? Come on.
Well,
anyhow, that's like I said. I'd much rather talk about who's going to be in the Hall of Fame, or talk about something baseball-y rather than talk about that.
Okay,
no point.
Well then let's talk about, when you say who's going to be in the Hall of Fame, are they ever going to allow Mr. Miller of the Players Union into the Hall of Fame? And how could it be that Pud Selig gets into the Hall of Fame on first 15 minutes he's gone from baseball, and Miller doesn't?
That's the easier one to answer. That's the easier one to answer.
All you have to do is commissioner and serve at least 10 years. You have him, Hewlett, and Frick all in there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if you read The Game,
I read that.
John's book, The Game.
I read that,
which is a stunningly good book, which will tell you exactly why Bud Selig got into the Hall of Fame on the first ballot. Literally every commissioner, with the exception of the general, and also Bart Giamatti, who was, I think, commissioner for 5 months before he died.
Peter, the four that are in there are Eckert, Giamatti, Vincent, and Uberoth.
And Uberoth. Those four are the only commissioners who are not in, and that's because they weren't in for long enough.
Exactly.
But if you're the baseball commissioner, it doesn't matter really. You could be the worst bigot in the world, and if you ran baseball long enough, you'll get into the Hall of Fame. The fact that Kennesaw Mountain Landis, who was an absolutely deplorable federal judge, he made decisions that were overturned all the time. But at the time, in 1920, after the Black Sox scandal, they desperately needed somebody to make it look like baseball was cleaning up its act. So they picked Judge Landis, who was involved in a lawsuit. And I believe it was someone from the Federal League who was suing baseball to be a monopoly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Judge Landis somehow took the bull by the horns and backed Major League Baseball rather than the teams from the Federal League, which gave Van Johnson and these other guys the idea, Al Spalding, the idea that Landis would be a perfect person to pick as the new baseball commissioner. The thing they didn't understand about Landis was that he had a tremendous ego. And so when they said, would you be the commissioner, we'll give you a term for a year, Landis's first remark is, I'll take it, but forever, until the day I die. And they gave in to that. And the other thing he said was, and the other thing is, if you make me commissioner, I make the final decision. Nobody else has any more control over me. And they gave in to that too. So they had somebody who wasn't always the most rational person in the world who was making decisions for baseball. And I must say, the one thing that he did do when these 8 members of the Chicago White Sox went to trial, and somehow a lot of the confessions were lost and some of the other evidence was lost, and they were all found innocent. One of the smart things that he did, though Joe Jackson fans are not happy about this, and Buck Weaver fans are not happy about this, is he suspended all those guys for life, and he would not change his mind ever. So none of those guys ever got to play baseball ever again. Then, of course, Babe Ruth came in, and he brought the fans back. And so in some way, you could argue that Landis doing that saved baseball. And as a result, he should be in the Hall of Fame. But, and the big but was that Landis, who oddly enough was from Indiana. you'd have thought he was from Georgia or Mississippi or Alabama or someplace like that. But he was from Indiana. And he was just a horrendous racist, you know, and he, whatever arguments people made about African Americans being wonderful ball players, he absolutely refused to allow any African Americans to play baseball. And the only reason Jackie Robinson got to play in 1947, he signed in 46. The only reason he got to play was that he died. And so the next commissioner, who was Happy Chandler, was, even though he was from Kentucky, he was a governor of Kentucky, a senator from Kentucky. In my book Bums, I had the wonderful opportunity to interview Chandler, and I think I was probably the first person ever to do it. And he gave me this long spiel about how when Branch Rickey came to him and said, you know, I want to bring Jackie Robinson up to the majors, at the time they had taken a vote, and the vote was 15 owners voted no, and Rickey voted yes. And even though that was the fact, Happy Chandler said to Rickey, I will support you. You bring him up, and I'll make sure he gets a fair shot.
Did that take some selling from Rickey to him originally?
No.
Okay. That's
not
good to hear.
Not according to Chandler. Rickey took the train down to visit with Chandler. And basically Chandler said to him, you know, when I die, I don't want God saying to me, how come you didn't allow these people to, you know, to play?
Right.
Chandler was much more a Christian than a lot of the, you know,
he was a Christian with a small C as well as a large C.
No, that's exactly right. And
very often.
It was thrilling for me to be able to write it, and apparently thrilling for Chandler to be able to read it. Because one day I got this wonderful this package in the mail, and Happy Chandler had gone to the governor and had made me into a Kentucky colonel, an official Kentucky colonel. I've got the thing on my wall. Yeah, I was just thrilled. You know,
and that's why you moved to the South.
The fact that you know, the funny thing is, I wrote that book in 1982, 83, and this is something that happened in 1946. So how many years later, where Chandler, who was in his late 70s, early 80s, finally got the recognition he felt that he deserved for playing a role in bringing Robinson up to the majors?
Well, the owners refused to renew him in 1951, and they brought Fort Frick in, who was the president of the National League.
Yep.
And Fort Frick did back Jackie Robinson. It's probably the only thing he did that during his whole tenure there that was any good. But when he got into the commissioner's office, everything was a league matter. If it was a National League matter, he asked Mr. O'Malley. If it was American League matter, he asked Mr. Topping or Mr. Webb.
That's correct.
That's all he did.
That's not the president of the National League or the president of the American League.
Right.
But the owners who were the president of everything.
Yeah, and basically commissioners, I tell this to people, why doesn't the commissioner do this? Why? I said commissioners are tools of the owners, and they will do the owner's bidding. If you have a situation like the Brady situation in football, Roger Goodell was going to stay because Roger Goodell has made the NFL owners a fortune.
Right. Roger Goodell, people don't realize, Roger Goodell makes $22 million a year in salary.
Yeah.
$22 million a year in salary. So he must be doing something right. The same way Bud Selig. A pile of money, as Selig made the owners of baseball a pile of money. Selig really did a fine job.
Canceling the World Series, that was and covering up what now has turned out to be an era of folk, this, PED era, or he spent a lot of time covering it up at the beginning.
Well, he didn't cover it up. He just never said anything. And why should he? When Barry Bonds and Sammy Sosa and Mr. McGuire and some of these other fellows were hitting home runs, baseball was never, ever more popular. People flocked to the ballparks to see these people hit home runs. They did. And what were they going to do? They're going to say, stop becoming so powerful, stop hitting these home runs? No, of course not. And the other thing, of course, is they really dragged their feet when it came to banning these substances. They really didn't want to ban them. It made no sense to ban them because these players were becoming very powerful and were hitting home runs, and as a result, they were drawing fans by the millions. I mean, that's what I find so sort of ironic in a way, in that always when it comes to some sort of fight between the owners and the players, somehow the players always get it in the neck. When the owners in 1994 held this lockout and tried to basically, get the baseball players to give up so much of what Marvin Miller had won for them, and then the players wouldn't back down. You read in the newspapers, because the writers almost always take the side of the owners because they need the owners a lot more than they need the players, that somehow that the players were on strike. But the fact was the players weren't on strike at all. This wasn't something the players wanted. This was something the owners wanted. The owners wanted to kill the players' union, absolutely kill it. And when they couldn't do it, even after missing out on a World Series in 1994, that's when, this is, the timing was such that this is when the whole steroid business, came into the fore. It was started right around 1990, and it built and built and built and built and built. And the owners didn't complain about players using steroids. You never heard a single owner say, I don't want my players using steroids. And certainly, and Selig certainly didn't complain. The coaches didn't complain. No manager in his right mind would ever say, I want my players to
get into the Hall of Fame on the back of steroid users.
What's so interesting right now is that now that Selig is in the Hall of Fame, you're going to see slowly all of these players are going to get in. This year we had 3 players who the sense of it was that they used steroids, though all 3 denied it vehemently, because of course every ball player denies it vehemently. But Ivan Rodriguez, Bagwell from Houston, and who was the third? Was a wonderful player, Tim Raines from Montreal. All 3 of them. There was a sense that all 3 of them had used steroids. Now the difference between them and the others is that they hadn't stood before Congress and vowed, swore that they never used it. They never were in court. They never,
not here to talk about the past.
Yeah.
Here to talk about the
future. And they weren't in Jose Canseco's book, which is the other thing that
nothing has ever been proven wrong. They've never caught him in a lie in any of his writings. Never.
And the other thing that's so hilarious about all of this is that Andy Pettit, who was taking steroids, of course, said that he took steroids for one reason, and that was to get well, which is a perfectly wonderful reason to take steroids. But now that he's admitted that he took it, now he's perfectly eligible to be in the Hall of Fame, which is where he should be, as opposed to Barry or our boy Roger Clemens, who just fought and paid off his supplier, who has been in jail for the last 2 years. I mean, the whole thing's so bizarre, it's ridiculous. But Roger Clemens
Well,
has
Barry,
won 7.
Barry had a guy go to jail to keep from testifying as well.
Barry did too. Well, you've got one guy who's got 8 MVPs, another one who's got 7 Cy Young awards. Barry's got more home runs than anybody ever. Roger's got a ridiculous number of victories because the two of them were the best 2 players of the last 20 years. And people are now coming around. Each have got 50% of the votes this last vote, whereas before they were getting 10% and 20%. And I guarantee you next time around they'll get 60%, and then it'll be 70%. And the next 3 or 4 years, all of them will get into the Hall of Fame.
Now is that Selig's induction opened the door for these guys.
Correct.
That's the rationale
exactly right.
being used.
Yeah.
All right.
And
have any of either of you heard allegations along the way of Nolan Ryan and steroids?
No.
I think he was pitching before the whole steroid thing even came into existence. Now, what all of those guys were taking were greenies.
Yeah.
Which are today also banned from baseball. I mean, Pete Rose, who we did a book together, and we talked about the Phillies and the Reds using greenies. All those players use greenies. They take 3 or 4 of them before the game. They'd be so jacked up you could.
Jim Brosnan mentioned them in his book.
Brosnan mentioned them back in 1960 what? 61?
Yeah, 1959.
Oh yeah, before '69, way back.
Yeah, Brosnan was the first.
He wrote 2 great books: The Pennant Race and The Long Season.
The Long Season.
Long Season was first.
Lovely guy,
okay.
Jim Brosnan, lovely guy. I interviewed him for my Wrigleyville book.
I would have loved. He
sweetheart.
passed away a few years ago. I would have loved to have talked to him.
Oh, you would have loved him. He was wonderful. He was absolutely a very erudite, interesting guy. And he was around when the Cubs had the.
We can't forget Bowie Kuhn.
What's that?
We can't forget Bowie Kuhn, who was in the Hall of Fame, who was also
the Donald Trump of commissioners.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Bowie Kuhn, who never made, in all the years, never made a good decision. It was amazing.
And he was commissioner.
The worst decision he made, he banned Willie Mays and Mickey Mantle because they were greeters. This is before the big bucks. These guys, these poor guys got out before free agency. DiMaggio, too, when you think about it, you wonder why he had to sign bats and balls just to have the self-respect of making the money. Because, and he banned those 2. They were out of baseball for a year. They were coaches. Yeah. They were first base coaches.
Oh yeah.
They were people would come to Yankee Stadium to see Willie, to see Mickey and Elston Howard rotate as first base coach. That wasn't good enough. You
want to hear a Bowie story? Quick Bowie story?
Sure.
When I flew out, I went to a lot of games in the World Series from 1969 to 1978. And I flew out to Cincinnati in 1970. I have a friend of mine that doesn't live that far from there, and he was going to pick me up at the airport. So I'm sitting in coach, and in the flight in, all the baseball brass is sitting in first class. It was Bowie Kuhn and Joe Cronin, who was the AL president, and whoever was the NL president at the time. And they said Bowie Kuhn has a big announcement to make after the plane lands. He's going to hold a press conference. So I'm saying to myself, what is it? Somebody's throwing the World Series again? You know what it was? He had reinstated Denny McLain, and McLain had been traded to Washington. That was the whole big deal. He made such a big deal out of it, the way he made such a big deal out of Ball 4, and the way he made such a big deal out of the Prince Peterson by Kekich trade.
Yeah.
Trading of wives. Yeah.
The ultimate baseball trade. Fritz is a friend of the show.
He wrote a book he dedicated, I think, the second book he did, thanking Bowie Kuhn for making his Ball 4 into a bestseller.
Yeah. No, everything Bowie did was idiotic. Yeah. Oh, sure. Sure. Bowie Kuhn went on TV and talked about how horrible it was that Bowden could, say such things without ever having read the thing.
For the good of the game.
About
that's the phrase he used all the time.
Yeah. No, it was very, very strange. But the worst thing that Bowie Kuhn did, in actuality, which is why it's sort of amazing that they put him in the Hall of Fame, was that Marvin Miller made him look like a putz.
Oh, yeah.
Every time Marvin Miller came up with something.
Yeah.
Kuhn had no clue as to handle Marvin Miller. I mean, it was wonderful, wonderful, wonderful to watch. They had the start, of Marvin Miller. I just adored that man. It started with Messersmith and McNally, where they both played out the season without a contract. And so what Marvin then did, he was going to go to arbitration, I guess it was, to make a decision on whether or not the end of the year meant the end of the year. In other words, let me explain the reserve clause. Albert Spalding in 1876 came up with this idea of the reserve clause. Very clever. So that when a player's contract was over, it was automatically renewed by the same ball club, which meant that if you were a ball player and a good ball player, that you were virtually a prisoner of that one particular team. You could not...
Unless they released you or sold you or traded you.
Unless they released you, sold you, you could not negotiate with any other team.
Yeah.
And this was, in 1976, this was 100 years later, what would turn out to be the end of the reserve clause. And so they went to arbitration, and Peter Size, the arbitrator, ruled against Bowie Kuhn. And Kuhn was right up to the very day of the arbitration saying there's no way that they're going to change this. They can't possibly change this. And, of course, they did. So Size freed every single ball player, said the reserve clause, no good anymore, you're all free. Now, the most brilliant thing that Marvin Miller did at that point, he knew that if he let all the players be free, that when they went to make salaries, they wouldn't be this huge jump. So he said, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll take players who've been playing, say, 6 years, and I don't remember the exact number of years, but it was a certain number of years.
Yeah.
6 years.
Man to trade after 5 and became free.
And that's right. And we'll take that class of people, and only those people will be free. So there were, say, 20 of them. And every single one of those guys ended up with $1 million.
Yeah, the thing is also, you recognize that the owners, they have minor leagues. It's not like basketball or football. You go straight from college into the top pros.
Yep. And what was genius about it, really genius about it, Kuhn had no idea what Marvin Miller was doing. He didn't have a clue. He said, okay, great, that's great. Okay, we got fewer players being free. Let's agree to that. And they did. And every step that Marvin took, he just stomped them. And as a result, the players are now making millions, whereas before they were making thousands.
Yeah, well, one of the things I disagree with Bowie, I have no brief for Charlie Finley, but when when Finley tried to sell off Rudy Fingers and Blue before they became agents,
and he
voided the
stopped
ball in the best interest of baseball.
I'll tell you a funny story. I was working for the Bergen Record that day.
Yeah.
And they had me write the story on the front page, and I wrote this story about how Finley's sale to the Yankees and the Red Sox were changing the face of baseball. And the next day, Bowie Kuhn, he voided all the trades, making me look like an idiot, which I thought was really, really something. But as I said...
I remember vividly seeing a picture of Rudy and Fingers in Red Sox uniforms.
Yeah, that's right.
They were actually working out.
Yeah. That's right.
I looked for that once, couldn't find it on Google, but I'll try again.
But Bowie Kuhn, because it's almost 9 o'clock. It's time for us to go.
Yeah, I have one question to ask you. You wrap it up, but I have a question to ask you before we close. But you finish your thought, please.
Finish my thought. My thought was Bowie Kuhn, after he left baseball, went back to his law office, went bankrupt, took whatever money he had and moved to Florida, because in Florida they can't take your house away.
Whoa.
And lived out his life that way.
Did not know that.
Yep.
Wow.
I once saw him speak at the New York Public Library along with a bunch of people, and he was as pompous up there as he was every
absolutely
time.
as pompous as could be.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Right.
But Marvin Miller, he's in the Hall of Fame, and Marvin Miller isn't, and that's as tragic as Joe Jackson, Pete Rose,
it took
Barry
about 100
Bonds.
years to put in William Hobart, the real founder of the National League, in. It took about 100 years to put in the two best managers of the 19th century, Ned Hanlon and Frank Salia in. It took about 100 years to put Jacob Ruppin in, while Tom Yorkie got in 30 years ago.
Well, I mean,
right. An incredible
Tom
racist.
Tom Yorkie, who was a terrible racist. Joe Cronin was a terrible racist.
Right.
Adrian Anson was a terrible racist. I mean, the Hall of Fame's filled with terrible racists.
All right, with that in mind, how do you answer in general when you hear that? This is an expression with the hair stand up in the back of my neck. When you hear he or she was a product of their time, what do you say to that?
It's true. It's true. I mean, what's amazing about this country, and that's why having hired a white supremacist to be the head of the country, to me, is just beyond a reality. We have worked so hard to get racial equality or a semblance of racial equality in this country. We have worked so hard to get a semblance of gender equality in this country. We have worked so hard so that we don't discriminate against gays who are now able to marry. It's since the 1920s when the racism was just so beyond the pale, to get to 2017 where people can live in peace for the most part with each other, and now to have elected somebody who wants to go back to the 1920s, it just makes me crazy.
Yeah.
And with that,
join the
fun
club.
Good night to you all.
Yeah. Join the club. And it's not just us three.
Yeah.
We three. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Appreciate your company.
Okay, good night.
And we'll do it same time next week. And
Super Bowl's next week. I won't be available.
You won't? Okay. But we
After
will be
that,
available
fine.
for basketball in a day or so.
Okay.
Am I correct?
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Tuesday night.
Thank you, Alan Blumkin. Yeah. Thank you, Professor Golenbock. Bye, everybody.
Bye.